let's dive into AP Deductions overview, and this is focusing just on Walmart. So let's dive in. Okay, what is the difference between an AP deduction and an AR fine? Accounts payable deductions versus account receivable fines. So deductions, they're going to actually be taking money from your payment. So that means that they're going to be deducting it from a check. Compliance fines, but they're actually going to invoice those for you, invoice you first. The AR fines, the compliance fines, they're going to invoice you for those first. You're usually going to see it in something like a high radius. And then if you don't pay that invoice, then they will actually go and deduct it from your check. So deductions are going to just go ahead and automatically subtract that. And then it's your responsibility to then go and dispute it versus compliance fines. They're going to invoice you for that and then eventually deduct it. But during that kind of time frame of whenever they're invoicing it for you, you can actually go and usually dispute that or talk to your buyer, all of that. We do have a lot of information on, compliance fines such as the SQUEP program or Supplier Quality Excellence program, the On Time in Full program, also called OTIF with Walmart. Those are under the compliance fine bucket and not really what we're going to be talking about here today, but we do have so much content on it. And I'm sure Ali can actually go and direct you guys to that. And if you guys are curious about learning more about how you can dispute what they are, all of that fun stuff. Okay, so AP deductions, we do include post audits with that. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with post audits, but we have another awesome webinar on post audits if you want to do a deep dive in that. But accounts payable deductions, again, are going to be coming off of an invoice. You're going to go and dispute them in something called the Accounts Payable Dispute Portal, APDP. If anyone has been doing this for a while, for more than a few years, APDP is the Retail Link app that has actually replaced Direct Commerce, which was a third-party app a few years ago. And we're going to go into all the details of that, but high level, that's what it is. And then post audits, this is a fun thing, and I say that very sarcastically, that Walmart does, where they will actually review transactions up to 2 years to go and recover the funds from that. So that means that they're going to be combing through all of your data. They will actually comb through emails that you're having with your buyer. They will comb through the disputes that you've submitted, and they will lease this out to contract this out to 3 different agencies to do all of that combing. And they'll submit new post audits to you, which will be an additional fine. And so it goes up to 2 years. It's not fun to deal with. Usually it's difficult to go and find kind of the proof documents that you need for that. And the process for it is actually disputing with the auditing team. So those 3 different contractors, whoever actually submits it to you, you would actually go and dispute with that specific auditing team. So if you're curious, we do have content around that, which we'll dive into post audits and kind of how you can go about that in a separate webinar. But AP deductions do include post audits, and that's high level the difference between the two of them. Okay, so overview of accounts payable deductions. So this is actually going to be coming from Walmart's accounts payable department. They have a lot of systems and infrastructure in place that they're going to be issuing most of these to you automatically by combing through your retailing data, combing through your data with Walmart, and they'll just automatically be submitted if they think that something has gone wrong. But they originate from the accounts payable department. It's going to be withheld from a check, like I mentioned. Claim number, so that is going to be the number that comes through with the deduction that you're receiving, is typically the invoice number that it is associated to. So, and we'll kind of show you guys what that looks like here in a little bit. You can find the backup info available for it in the accounts payable inquiry system in Retail Link. That's another app. So those are one of the 2 main apps that we'll be talking about here today. APDP and APIS is what we call the other one. That's where a lot of the backup information is. So we'll get into that. Typically, this is going to include a deduction code and then actually a description on the check itself. There are some weird deduction codes where there won't won't be a very descriptive description. That's not very helpful. We do have a ebook that has all of the different deduction codes, what they are, what they could mean, how to prevent them. It's our Walmart Deduction Codes Explained Guide. I'm sure Ali can send that in there in the chat. But go and check that out if you have any questions on very specific codes. We're going to go over a couple of examples here today, but if you're wanting a more in-depth overview, that's going to be one of the more helpful resources for you to go and look at. There are roughly 75 different AP deduction codes. Walmart is, we deal with quite a few different retailers here at SupplyPike and at Supplier Wiki, and Walmart definitely has the most extensive list of deduction codes, which is, I feel like in some ways a blessing and a curse, because you can get very specific and you can drill down and hopefully know, what can I do about this specific code? But it is a lot to remember, and it's a lot to try to keep track of. So again, kind of a blessing and a curse there, but we do have that deduction guide, which I see that Ali just sent in the chat. Go check that out if you're wanting a more in-depth overview of each of those different codes. And then, like I mentioned earlier, most of those are going to be disputed through the Accounts Payable Dispute Portal, which replaced Direct Commerce. So if you guys, again, are familiar with that old system, that is gone. That's, again, been gone for a few years now. And all of it is actually done through Retail Link, not a third party. Awesome. So what is the impact of deductions? And I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier when I was talking about compliance fines and AP deductions, but unfortunately, whenever something goes wrong, or either on your behalf or like on the supplier end or on the Walmart end, it usually can result in multiple fines being issued to you as the supplier, even if it's not your fault. So in this example, let's say that I'll just kind of talk high level. Let's say you short ship something, or Walmart thinks that you have short shipped. So you haven't sent Walmart all of the product that they were expecting. That usually will result in a code 24 or code 22 being issued against you guys, which is a shortage deduction. You can also see that come as a PO defect on your actual SWEP fine. So that's the Supplier Quality Excellence Program. And then you'll also have an in full fine usually come around for the OTIF program. And so this is just a kind of overview of how those fines can stack up. And even if you go and actually dispute that in each of these three different programs, a single issue that, again, may not be your fault, may be Walmart's fault for receiving it incorrectly, a deduction can actually be submitted against you guys in the form of a post audit. And so there potentially could be 4 times that you're having to fight a single issue that wasn't even your fault in the first place, which I know can be a lot, but hopefully in this webinar and some of the other resources that we've shared, we can break down how to address each of those issues and do it effectively. Okay. So we will get into the actual disputing of deductions, and that's what the majority of our time is going to be focusing on here today. But another big piece of this is avoiding the deductions in the first place. So, there's some things like I've said that Walmart makes a mistake and you're the one who ultimately has to pay for it by spending time going through and disputing everything. But there are other times where, it may be an issue that on your end, on the supplier end. And so here are some high-level best practices that we suggest and Walmart suggests, and everyone we've talked to have kind of established of this is how you can avoid the deductions that you can avoid and prevent them from happening. So we suggest only submitting 1 invoice per PO when possible. And this is pretty much in every case. There are some times where you might think, oh, it would be better if I submitted multiple POs. Don't do that. Submit multiple invoices. Don't do that. Try to submit only 1 invoice per PO. Confirm your item setups. This is pretty big, and I feel like something that a lot of people struggle with is making sure that their items are set up correctly just because of how complex it is. I will say we are doing an entire series with One World Sync. If you guys are familiar with them, they're one of the largest like item setup companies. We are doing 3 webinars with them directly, and then we are doing a separate webinar focusing specifically on Walmart and item 360. We're calling it item 360 201 in February. So if you guys are curious about that, please join. I bet Ali, sorry, Ali, I'm really making you work today on the links, but I bet we can send, there we go. Yeah, we can send that in the chat. So if you have any questions around item setup, because I do know that it is so complex, please check that out. Join us for those. We would love to have you. We suggest transmitting invoice with Walmart item numbers. That way it just makes it easier for Walmart to match up one for one. Match your invoice to the PO and don't make adjustments on the invoice that don't match the PO. This kind of goes along with only submitting one invoice per PO whenever possible and transmitting invoices with Walmart numbers. Best practice, you really want your invoice to match as closely to the purchase order that Walmart has issued to you, because again, a lot of these fines are actually going to be automatically given to you based off of the data that is in Walmart's system. So even if it is technically correct, if you do not have kind of a one-for-one matching on what Walmart is actually issuing to you, then that's usually going to trigger some of that automation that Walmart has on their end to give you a deduction. Do not master pack different items. In our OTIF series, I think we say do not master pack probably 20 times. And if you guys are curious about that, we do dive that more into it in some of the OTIF resources that we've listed. But master packing, again, can kind of trigger some of those deductions happening to you automatically. And then this one, I suggest, but I understand for especially larger suppliers who are dealing with a high volume, that this is really difficult to do. But using color coding or imagery to differentiate between products can be a really helpful tool, especially if you're dealing with a lot of shortage codes. And the reason why I say this is at Walmart DCs, and if you guys have the chance to go and walk through a Walmart DC, I highly suggest that you do it. They do sometimes do DC tours. I've had the chance to do one myself. It was very enlightening. But in the actual DC, what they're doing is there's a human who is taking in your product, and they're writing down what they think you have shipped to them. And so if you have on a pallet multiple different boxes of different types, different SKUs or different colors, usually what they're doing is, and they're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of packages in a day, a week. They're just looking at it and writing it down and at what they think is on the pallet. And as we know, humans make errors. And usually what will happen is if you're not differentiating between products and they are different items, they're just assuming that it's all the same item. So you'll typically see like a shortage in a very specific item and an overage on the item that they didn't count, and an overage on the item that they just assumed the entire pallet was. And so that's the reason why we suggest like using color coding or imagery to differentiate on the boxes of what you're shipping actually to Walmart DCs, because it eliminates some of that human error. They can actually go and look at it and just makes it a little bit easier for them. Again, I know for some of the larger suppliers, that is just not very reasonable, a reasonable expectation. And so I suggest, doing this if you can, but I understand if you cannot. Okay, so that's kind of the basics. Let's dive into the deduction code types. So, I see Allie's here. We have a question.
Yeah, so I wanted to cover this question that was submitted by Roseanne. This one's a little obscure, so Melodie, I do know the answer, and I assume you may as well, but the question is for AP deductions, or rather, this is for AP deductions, but today she's asking about AR deductions. There is something coming through without a PO number or description that's only referencing store 9,000. Are you familiar with this really obscure, Walmart lingo.
Okay, I am, but I think you know it better than me. So do you want to go and tell the group?
Sure. And feel free. I was also going through my notes just to make sure I'm right, because this is one that doesn't come up often, but essentially what it's relaying is that this is a post audit. So you should go to your accounting team and make sure that they've received a packet via either email or like an actual physical packet, and it'll come through as a post audit. So there should be details in that document, however it's sent to you for that. Melody, what would you add to that?
That's basically it. And again, we do have resources on post audits that are going to dive into that a lot more. How do I go about it? What should I expect? How do I dispute it? So if you have questions, please check that out. Because I looking over the deck, I don't think we'll cover much more of that here today. So yeah, post audits are they're really not fun to deal with. I hate having to deal with those just because, again, it is so difficult to get the information. It's not as easy as it is to dispute an APDP, but that does sound like a post audit to me.
Yep. I'll send some of our content on post audits in the chat, but I'll let you get to more of the AP deductions here.
Perfect. Great. Okay. So there's different categories, or this is how we categorize Walmart deductions. Again, there's over those 75 different AP deduction codes at Walmart, and Walmart doesn't categorize them. So this is our own kind of, they're looking at, hundreds of suppliers, working with hundreds of different suppliers and all of the different categories and working with, 4 different retailers. This is kind of how we bucket them and what we suggest for you to do. So looking at Walmart deductions, there's one of the biggest ones is shortages and shipping related issues. So again, I've kind of high level talked about that. We do have more content on just shortage deductions, so please check that out if you're curious. But shortages are one of the number one reasons why suppliers might be experiencing fines. And thankfully, it's one of the easiest ones to actually go and get paid back. So there might be a really large volume for you to go and dispute, but those are the ones that actually have some of the highest win rates, and people are the most successful with going and disputing those. Next is going to be pricing discrepancies. That's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's just Walmart saying, hey, I thought that I was going to get charged this much and you charged me this much. I'm going to fine you for whatever the difference is. And of course, they're only going to be issuing those against you if it's going to be in Walmart's favor. So high level, that's what a pricing discrepancy is. Allowances are interesting. So allowances are going to be according to the terms of your supplier agreement. So we do have another, I believe it's a webinar. Yes, it's a webinar on Walmart accounting that covers supplier agreements pretty robustly. So if you're curious about what that is, unfortunately, usually I feel like a lot of people who are dealing with AP deductions are not as involved with the supplier agreement whenever it's being issued. Usually it's like an account manager or something like that. I may be wrong, but in my experience, that's what I've seen. And so you may not even know what your team or your company is necessarily agreeing to that you're getting all of these allowance fines for. So, and allowances, they're going to be the money that Walmart is saying that they should be taking due to that agreement that you have with them, that supplier agreement that you have with them. But sometimes it can be very wrong. They could be double dipping, triple dipping, taking way more than they should, from what your contract is actually saying. Next, we have returns. So returns are returns. It's whenever someone either returns something to the store or they return something to the DC. So some sort of like defective merchandise. That's pretty common. We see it so much with apparel. Apparel, I feel like, has the majority of returns. If shortage and shipping related issues are not your first highest deduction code that you're experiencing, returns is usually going to be the next one. And then lastly, we just have miscellaneous, because that's just where we put all of the ones that don't perfectly fit in each of these different buckets. Cool. So let's go over some examples. So an example of a shipping or shortage code is going to be code 22. And the definition of this is it's when a quantity of an item on the invoice does not match the quantity that the facility says that it's received. And so again, kind of that color coding that I was talking about, or that receiving area that I was talking about, that could be a good preventative measure for this code specifically. Merchandise code. So here's a code 93. That's going to be a return. So merchandise return due to damages that prevented the item from being sold before the merchandise was actually placed on the store. So that's going to be kind of a DC level return. Next, we have a pricing code. So this is going to be one of those pricing deductions that I was talking about, it's a pricing allowance type one. So that's when there was a discrepancy in the allowances between the invoice and the PO. So that means that on your purchase order that you received from Walmart, they were expecting a certain amount of allowances taken off where they get a credit. And then whenever you issued the invoice, your allowances that you put on the invoice are not matching up with what they were expecting on the purchase order. Again, pretty common if you are not matching one for one on that purchase order to the invoice. That's whenever that's automatic kind of software. It's usually going to kick out and just automatically submit a deduction against you. Last, we have an allowance code. This is going to be code 59. And so this occurs whenever allowance is listed on the supplier agreement, but it's not included on the invoice. So this just doesn't necessarily mean that it is on the purchase order, but it still means that Walmart expected it to be based off of the contract that you had with them, and you did not give it to them. There's a lot of different allowance codes for all sorts of things. So this is just an example of one, a high level one. Okay, so disputing code 22. So how do you actually go about and dispute that shortage code? So this is that goods billed not shipped. So in this scenario, the bill of lading, or the BOL, was stamped as received at full at the facility, but the invoice was transmitted for the quantities greater than what the facility claimed to receive. Okay, so let's break that down. So that means that the BOL, so that means that Walmart received your order at their DC, and whoever was receiving that order actually went and said, yes, I received the full order, but then your invoice was actually transmitted for a greater quantity than what they said that they received. So you've invoiced too much, according to Walmart. Usually what this means is that you're just going to go and dispute by getting that BOL and getting that purchase order and getting your invoice and bundling that all together and actually disputing through APDP. Relatively simple. Again, this is one of the more common ones that suppliers will go and dispute and get paid back on. Here are the top 3 codes by dollar amount. Like I said, shortage deductions are very common. So we've gotten this data from quite a few different suppliers, and the number one code that we see is that code 22. So goods billed not shipped. Code 25 is saying that they didn't receive any of the merchandise for that invoice. So that means that they didn't receive anything on that purchase order that was actually invoiced. Usually I see this as an EDI error or something's gotten lost. We have more details around that a little bit later on. And then we have a code 24, which is very similar to a code 22. It just means that there was a shortage, but usually this means that at the DC, they said that it was short, not necessarily that you invoiced more than you should have. Yep, all of, like down at the bottom, it says all of the top codes by dollar amount or shortage related codes. Very common. If you're experiencing a lot of these, you're not alone. Awesome. Okay, how do you dispute a code 93? So this is going to be that merchandise return. So The fun thing about Code 93s is that it also comes with a whole bunch of other codes. So that we're looking at code 44, 60, 75, and 120. You're going to check your online supplier agreement for each of these 4 areas that can make the claim invalid. So you're going to be disputing, what is that, 5 codes if this is incorrect. But we suggest that you go and check each of these errors before you do any of that disputing. So what this looks like is a defect allowance. So you're going to check your supplier agreement showing the agreed upon defective allowance. So this is the amount of money that you are agreeing to with Walmart, that basically a percentage of what you think is going to be defective, and you're just giving that to Walmart. You want to show in your documentation the total cost of defective returns to date versus the amount that you've actually paid in defective allowances. So you want to make sure that, hey, am I meeting kind of that threshold of allowances that I've agreed to with Walmart? Have I surpassed it? Am I under it? And then provide that as proof to Walmart if that is the case. Responsibility. So again, check your supplier agreement. You're going to hear a lot of that in the next couple of sections to see if those defective returns are your responsibility or if they're Walmart's responsibility. I usually see that it's the responsibility of the supplier, so that even might be a better place for you to check first. Failure to return. So again, check your supplier agreement to show that the defective goods must be returned to the supplier, and statement that goods were never received. So if you are agreeing with Walmart that the goods should be returned to you unless, they're unable to, and they were never sent to you, then you can actually go and dispute this deduction with Walmart. And then lastly, you're going to want to look at pricing. So your pricing info showing that the actual cost of the item was less than the cost deducted per item on the claim. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory there. If they're taking more money than they actually paid you for it, then you can go and dispute that. Okay, hopefully that cleared that up for everyone. All right, we got a code 59. So this is a swell versus defective goods allowance. So how do we go and dispute that? What is this? Usually this is negotiated again with your supplier agreement to help kind of counteract the costs that might be with handling defective goods. So this is Walmart saying, I am going to be handling some of your defective goods, and I want to charge you as the supplier a percentage of that and not have it come from my pocket. And so here you're going to want to check to see if the percentage is adequate to cover all of the defective good markdowns, or if there's going to be additional claims that are going to be filed. Execution, this percentage is going to actually just be applied to the total amount of all POs generated. Again, it's in your supplier agreement. It's going to be just across the board, pretty much applied to everything. Okay, how do you dispute a code 10? So this is whenever a price is different than what is documented. So it is possible to actually go and dispute these if it's being used incorrectly. You're still going to be submitting that in the accounts payable dispute portal in Retail Link. If the dispute is denied, but you feel like this price is just it's just absolutely not what you've agreed on, you have the documentation to show it, and you've disputed in accounts payable, you can contact your buyer directly to request a payback. One of our favorite things to say, maybe not favorite things to say, but something that we find ourselves saying pretty often whenever it comes to Walmart and the different compliance fines and programs, is that your mileage may vary depending on your buyer. I say that lovingly. Your buyer, it is all dependent on just the different category that you are in, or even what your buyer has been trained to do, what they feel like they have the power to do. They can sometimes reverse fines. They can sometimes get you paid back, but your mileage may vary depending on the buyer that you have. It doesn't hurt to ask, but I don't be surprised if they do not pay you back, or if they don't even get back to you, especially depending on the category and how many other suppliers they might be working with. Okay. We got about 10 minutes before we go over to questions, so we'll dive right into this. But the accounts payable dispute portals, other apps, and actually how to go and dispute. So let's get into the more tactical things. So what do you need to actually go and dispute an AP deduction? This list is going to be varied dependent on the specific type of deduction code. And I know we did just a high level overview of a couple of examples, but that deduction guide that Ali sent earlier, that is actually going to list each of the different types of documents that you need for each of the different codes, how to prevent it, how to dispute it, all of that information. So if you have any outstanding questions around that, that's going to be a very great place to start. But generally, this is what we suggest including with pretty much every deduction that you're receiving if you want to go and dispute it. Any of those shipping documents that you have, so that proof of delivery, which is also called a POD, or the BOL, the bill of lading, if that is relevant to the code, which again, short shipping, that's going to be the most relevant, you're going to want to actually go and include that. You're going to want to include a copy of the invoice. So that is going to be the EDI document of 810. If you are a smaller supplier, you might have Walmart's free web EDI, where you can actually go and get those documents from there. If not, you might want to talk to your IT team. SBS Commerce, True Commerce are really common EDI providers. You can usually, for those larger EDI providers, go and download the documents from there. And that's the document number that you're looking for your invoice. For a purchase order, that's going to be the EDI document 850. Again, just kind of follow the same process, either use web EDI or your EDI provider. And then lastly, your supplier agreement, which is actually going to be in Walmart, in Retail Link. So you can find that in there. Again, that accounting webinar that we talked about for Walmart, we do cover how to actually go and pull that in there if you don't know where to find it. Okay, you're going to need some information from the claim itself to actually go and dispute it. You're going to need that claim number. So for a deductions related to an invoice, which most of them are, the claim number is actually going to equal the invoice number. So it should match up 1-for-1. And should be relatively easy to find, especially if you have that invoice that you need for the backup documentation. Claim date. This is specifically the date from the claim. It's not the invoice date. It's not the check date. It is the date that you received the dispute. Received the deduction. And so you should be able to see that in APIS. I'll leave it at that. You'll see it in APIS. You'll see it whenever it comes across an APDP. The claim date is the date that you received the claim, not any of the other million dates that are out there. Dispute type. So this is calculated from a store division number on the deduction check line and the location type. I don't know if we have like an easy way. In our application, it does it automatically for you, but Ali, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong, if we have any resources on how to find that. Usually it's going, I see you popping up.
Keep talking. I'm looking at our resources to see if we have something like that.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, usually I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory because it's like, okay, is this coming from a store? Is this coming from a Sam's Club? Is this coming from a DC? And then usually you can pick it from there. But I don't know if we have some best practices around that. But if we do, we'll definitely send it out to you guys.
I think I have an article I'll send, and I would also say the Walmart deductions, the title, sometimes I get in a tongue twister. The Walmart deductions codes explained would be helpful as well.
Perfect. Claim code. So this is going to be that deduction code that I've been talking about, code 2295, all of that stuff. Within a given claim, so that means typically it's going to be on like an invoice item. You're going to want to group like claim codes together and dispute them together. So when Walmart moved from direct commerce to APDP, one thing that they did, which I know has caused a lot of work for people, is they actually split up different claims by item. So in some ways it was a lot more clear, but in other ways it was like, okay, how do I actually go and dispute this? You're going to want to group again, like claim codes, dispute them together, especially through APDP if it's on the same invoice. Dispute amount. Dispute the full claim amount. Just like a lot of deductions are given automatically to suppliers based off the data that has in their system. In APDP, the person who's reviewing your case per dispute it's usually a person, but sometimes it is automated. So we have seen for certain deductions like those shortage related deductions, they will pretty much automatically approve or deny a claim based on some criteria. We have a guess on what that criteria is, but not a fully formed one enough to even share with you all. But one of the suggestions that we have for you guys is just dispute the full claim amount, even if you're only due part of it. Walmart is going to reject the disputes when the dispute amount does not match the claim amount. So that is just a suggestion that we have for each of you guys, no matter if it's automated or if there's a person at Genpact who's actually going and reviewing it. Cool. Okay, supplier number. So this needs to match the 6-digit supplier number on the dispute that came from the claim. So some of you guys may have multiple supplier numbers, so this can be really easy for some and more difficult for others, but you're just going to want to make sure that matches up. You want your purchase order number. So what is that purchase order that matches up with that invoice? And then who is the freight carrier? So this is optional. The individuals at Genpact who are reviewing this rarely reference it. If you're using a software like ours, it will do that automatically for you if we have that data. But it can be helpful information, especially if you have a case where you have a giant list of BOLs and proofs of delivery. And if you're not separating those in order to give the most relevant information to the person who's reviewing your dispute, adding the freight carrier in there can maybe make it a little bit easier for them to actually go and reference what exactly you're talking about whenever you're going and disputing. Okay. We're almost done here, you guys. I know it's a lot of information, but stick with me. Location, this again is going to be versus the store or DC where the claim originated from. Again, this is going to be one of those things, just like what we talked about over here with the dispute type, which you usually can kind of figure out yourself. Okay, did this originate in a store? Did this originate in DC? It's usually found on the check line and usually in the claim document. Shipping method, this is required. Choose collect if you don't know, but I highly suggest you get more familiar with how you're shipping because how you get your proof documentation is very dependent on how you're shipping. Now, some suppliers might ship some orders in prepaid, some orders in collect, and we know that can make it more difficult. But typically what we see for smaller to medium-sized companies is you're going to do one or the other. Description, this is optional. We suggest, keep it simple, short and sweet. Individuals who are people at Genpact are really referencing this, but it can be a helpful thing to include, especially if you have like that master BOL that I was talking about. You can kind of direct the person who's reviewing your case or reviewing your dispute to the information that you're trying to convey to them. Okay, what are the steps for actually going and disputing AP deduction? So Um, you're going to, this is what we suggest, as well as kind of a best practice after talking to, hundreds of different suppliers. Usually where I like to start is say, okay, I'm going to go as far back as I possibly can within that 2-year window. And I'm going to focus on a specific type of deduction. So let's say shortages. That just kind of helps me get in that mindset and work through, okay, am I just going and looking at my supplier agreement over and over again if it's an allowance type? Am I going and looking at my carriers if it's a shortage type? That's usually what we suggest if you're wanting to work through it quickly, but I know that everyone works a little bit differently. And then what you're going to want to do is actually go and find that invoice on the accounts payable inquiry system, kind of do a validity check. Okay, is this deduction correct? Am I receiving it as I should be, or is it an error? And depending on the type of code, that research process and that validity check is going to be very different. Again, in that deduction guide, it's going to detail it for each of the different types of deductions. So go and check that out. But usually, if it's an invalid deduction, you're going to want to gather that proof documentation, which usually you already have if you've done that validity check. And then you're going to want to go and actually dispute it on APDP. And then you want to make sure that you're saving all of that documentation later for claims or audits. So making sure it's stored in a place that is central, everyone can go and reference it, especially if you have a larger team that is dealing with multiples of these deductions, and it's easy to go and refer back to. If it is a valid deduction, that's whenever you go into kind of a preventative mode. And usually what we suggest is to actually try to build if you have the resources for this, build a cross-functional team in order to address these, because usually it's not, if you're in finance, usually the issue is not within your department. The being able to prevent it is not something that you can control. And so we actually have Jessica as on our team. She used to work at Harry's, and she was a part of the team that they created in order to deal with preventing deductions from happening. And it was cross-functional. She has a lot of really amazing insight into that. And we're hoping to do some content here in a little bit whenever she comes back from maternity leave on how to build cross-functional teams in order to go and address and prevent these from happening. But again, that's all dependent on the resources that you have. But typically what we see is best practice, try to adapt any processes to avoid future deductions. And then usually you're not going to want to dispute on APDP. I think that's an error there. Usually you're going to want to just mark that away, maybe put it in your system to say, hey, I checked this. This is not something that I actually want to go and dispute. This is something that I just kind of want to archive. I've looked at it. Let's get it kind of off of our books. Okay, so the AP tool landscape. So, I've thrown a lot of acronyms at you guys today, but these are the two main apps that you're going to be looking at are going to be APIS and APDP. There's also the accounting scorecard, which is just great to temperature check of your invoices. It's going to measure your invoice accuracy through the invoice match and EDI accuracy. So if you're dealing with a lot of code 10s, this might be a good place for you to go and check just to say, okay, are my invoices matching my EDI? It's a good debugger tool. APIS and APDP are definitely going to be the two tools that you'll be using the most. So APIS is going to store all of your invoice and claims information. This is where you're going to view and pull invoice checks and claim information. So very helpful. And then the accounts payable dispute portal. This is where you actually are going to, be pretty tactical and execute actually on those deductions and submit those disputes. It is the dispute portal for deductions. All right, how do you spot a Walmart deduction? Okay, so AP deductions are actually related to your own invoice numbers, like I've kind of said, and you'll usually have that kind of 2 to 3 digit reason code assigned, like we've been talking about. So what we see, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but looking at the deduction code down here at the bottom, we can have that lovely code 22. We have that deduction description of merchandise billed, not shipped. And then we have this claim amount, which is over here. So this is what a claim looks like. You can see the claim number, PO number. A lot of that information that we were talking about earlier of what you need is all right here in the actual claim. And so if you're wanting to actually submit this as proof to APDP, you could hit kind of that print preview and save it. This is what the accounts payable dispute portal looks like. So as I've said, I know you guys are like, you either know direct commerce or you don't. You know, it's not better one way or another. But if you want to view historical data that is not in APDP, something that was in direct commerce, you cannot view it through APDP. So that is just one thing to note. Genpact is still that third-party consulting agency that I've kind of talked about, is still reviewing disputes. They were the ones who were reviewing it with direct commerce. They're still doing it through APDP. They're just not using direct commerce, that third-party software provider, for that. Most AP reason codes can actually be disputed through APDP. There's just some that you may not want to dispute through APDP, even though you technically can. And then you can redispute up to 3 times. The Walmart gives you 3 chances to go and dispute something. After 3 times, you can't. And so you don't want to be in one of those situations where we've seen other suppliers just go and dispute everything and doing it, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but, you know, not putting a lot of thought into the very first dispute that they have, not providing all of the different documents that they need, and then Walmart, you know, rejecting it and kicking it back to them. And then you've lost, you know, one chance potentially to actually go and recover that money. And so we suggest trying to go and dispute it right the first time, just because, again, you only get 3 times to do it. And if it's a meaningful amount of money, if it's not something that you're willing to write off, you want to make sure that you have all of the chances that you can get. Because I actually just heard this earlier this week. We've seen pretty clearly, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Walmart moving off of the settlement program, which is where larger suppliers could actually go and dispute everything in bulk, and moving everyone to this mass dispute creation or APDP in order to do that. The volume of deductions has actually increased pretty heavily, and we'll talk more about this here in a second, but because of that, we have seen an increase of deductions that are disputes that are very clearly should never have been taken and should be paid back. But we believe due to the volume that Walmart is experiencing, they're just rejecting things, even if it's very clear that it shouldn't have been. And previously, they wouldn't have done that. So Genpact is a little overwhelmed right now, you guys. So you want to make sure you have all of the chances that you can get and set it up correctly the first time. So there's 2 different types of disputes in APDP. There's invoice-based disputing. So this is going to be a dispute based off the entire invoice. You're going to want to look up a claim or invoice record and then dispute from that record. And then there are claim line level disputes. And so this is going to be an individual dispute for every claim line that you want to challenge with an invoice. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where a lot of them, it's kind of changed from what it was previously, where for item numbers, there's a different claim that is being created for each item, even if it's the same code on the same invoice. All right, so what is the dispute process? You're going to want to go up to the top and click Create Dispute button. You're then going to want to select that 6-digit vendor number. You're going to want to select claim for the next to create dispute based on. So you can kind of see an example of that here. So this is when you'd pick between claim or invoice. Then you're going to want to enter the claim number or the date range within that. So if you're looking at APIS, you should have that information from what is in the claim, and then click the search button. Oh, I clicked next, but now I have a fun.
It's a scratch card, Melody.
I'll just keep doing this. There we go. Okay. So then you're going to see a list of claims. To create a dispute, you're going to want to click on Create Dispute. And then in the Create Update Dispute section, you're going to select those individual lines to dispute or update the dispute lines. So you can click them over here. And then a certain number of codes are required to be disputed together if they occur on the same claim. So in this example, a claim code 22 should be erased along with a 13. So for example, codes 13, 21, 22, 24, or like we talked about, 94, 60, 44, 120. And then you're going to want to update, like what we talked about, all of that information previously of what you need. You're going to want to update that here in this system based off of information that you have. And then click the Add button to the right of the description to add the information to the dispute. Make sure you click that. And then you must attach the supporting documentation, such as proofs of delivery, freight bills, using the attached proof link. One thing that we've seen, and just a side note on here, which I know that we're running out of time, but you can bulk add documents to some of the claim lines lists by clicking a Attach Proof for Multiple Lines button. We've seen with the multiple dispute creation, you can actually not attach proof documentation, which drastically lowers your chance of that being approved. You go from, I think it's around a 68 to 80% chance of actually getting like your dispute win rate down to an 8% chance if you're not attaching proof documentation. So make sure you're making use of this, because otherwise, again, you're going to lose your first chance with Walmart. And then after adding all of that information, you're going to click the next button at the bottom of the page. After clicking the next button, you can still go back and edit the claim by clicking the previous button, and you can click the Save button to create a draft of the dispute and return to it at a later time. Drafted disputes are only saved for 14 days. So if you don't submit the dispute after that time, the system will cancel the dispute, which can be kind of a hassle. So I suggest kind of working through all of those that you have in draft. And then you're going to click the Submit button. It's that easy, you guys. So you're going to click the Submit button. It's going to submit the dispute for review. You're going to have a pop-up window to show, your dispute case number and the numbers that you've actually gotten disputed. Oh, I have a scratch off again. Now we have some benchmark data is what we're getting to now. So what we've seen, again, looking at the data across different suppliers, is the total average time from submitted to paid is 51 days. So 49% of the disputes are approved within 7 days. And then the long tail is, this 49% of disputes approved in 7 days. We have a good feeling that that's done pretty automatically, or there's something that allows for someone in Genback to go and do that fairly quickly. These 45 days is, again, probably going to be handled on a case-by-case basis, where you have a person who's sitting down, looking at your research and approving it. The approved to repaid, we're looking at 6 days usually, and then 2% of the approved disputes actually going to take longer than 14 days to be paid. 2% is pretty low. So if you're not seeing it in 6 days, then you might be in this larger bucket, but it shouldn't take really longer than 14 days, longer than, 3 weeks to usually get paid back after it's been approved. So like I said, Walmart has moved away from the settlement program and moved to this move to APDP, putting everyone in that program. And it has, what we've seen, increased the approved time for some of the deductions. And so here's just a high level of the amount of disputes that are still open. You can see we still have about 10, 11% of disputes that are still open from November of 2022, which is just crazy. That is not something that typically would have happened, last year before they've moved people off of the settlement program. This data was pulled fairly recently, I think a month or two ago. Recently, we have seen it kind of very, very recently, we have seen it kind of speed up a little bit. But we'll keep you guys updated as that information comes available. I think, okay, I have 3 slides left. I know that we're at time, but I hope that this information was really helpful for you guys. I'll just spend a couple more minutes on this and then we can hopefully get to some questions. But if this is where you jump off, thank you for staying with us. I'm sorry I'm taking a little long today. But disputing for collect suppliers, Walmart standards is 2 years dispute. That is what Walmart has said. You have 2 years to go and dispute things. However, if a carrier claim needs to be filed, you roughly have 9 to 12 months to dispute after the merchandise is delivered. After that, Walmart is most likely to deny them. So you're going to watch out for claims created at the tail end of the supplier disputing window. Again, you're going to want to go as far back as you can and go to dispute those. But if you are a collect carrier, you really only have 9 to 12 months to go and get those documents that you need. Best advice we have for you guys is to stay up to date on collect disputes as you can to avoid running into this issue, which I know is easier said than done. Here are the dispute windows for some collect carriers. And so for Walmart, the majority of them, you have 11 months and 15 days, very specific. And then for other ones, you have about 8 months and 15 days. Okay, and this is what I was talking about. Oh, no, actually, this isn't. Do you want to kind of talk through this document, Allie?
Yeah, it is easy to get all of the Walmart APDB updates mixed up because there have been a lot in 2023. This is one we wanted to just recap because this one really shifts a lot of the features that are in APDB. So what I'd call out here is there are some disputes that you cannot no longer do on APDB, such as code 85s. Those should actually be disputed through, you actually reach out to supply chain management or EBS contact center. And again, those are allowance ones. Same with the build back allowance, the code 69. So there's a couple things in there. You'll have this deck so you can review it. The other things I would just call out is down here in that supporting documentation requirements, reviewing that. If you are prepaid, there's a couple additions there, and then there is one for collect as well. So we want to keep you guys updated. And then the other one that a lot of people may have seen is that DSS is going away in Melodie. I know you mentioned that, and that Luminate will be taking its place. So,
and I believe we have a Luminate webinar coming up.
We do. So if you guys are familiar with how we've been doing our webinars, we have one called Retail Link Recipes, and that is usually covered DSS. So we are covering a little bit of DSS if you still want to use it. I know some suppliers are still relying on DSS to pull their data. And then we're also going to be comparing that to Luminate because the data will not match. Luminate and the Luminate product team has mentioned that. So we're going to talk about how you can kind of compare, contrast, and transition your team into using Luminate and being off the ground once DSS is gone March 1st. So stay tuned for that webinar. It's coming out soon.
Awesome. All right. That was a lot, you guys. I appreciate you sticking with me. I know that was a lot of information that we've covered. We have a lot of supplier wiki resources that I know I've really been making Allie work for this session. So sorry about that, Allie, but they're always free, available to suppliers. So go and check those out. Here is our contact information. So those are actual emails, or you can find us at SupplyPike.com. And then awesome. Oh, we have someone from Canada. Do we have any high-level questions that we want to answer? Really quick?
I have one that I really wanted to get to, and it was on asking questions. So Nate asked about a price increase, which has been reflected at the retail level and on the cost of the activity manager, but POs are still at the old price. So he asked who is the best person to reach out for contact. And I actually pulled this from the Walmart supplier support group. There's a user on there if you want to look her up by name. Her name is Kristen Wingenbach. I hope I'm saying that right. And she works at Walmart and she is a group expert. And she actually, I'll share it in the chat right now, suggest that you reach out to this link. It is still called the EBS or Enterprise Business Services Debt Services team, but essentially that's where I would say reaching out. But that was the one question I wanted to get to high level. So Melodie, I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Cool. Perfect. Okay. I'll just do this really quick, you guys. I know that we've gone over time, but if you want to learn more about SupplyPike and how we can help you, especially with that really complex process that I just talked about, this is where we'll give you just a brief sneak peek into how we can help you with that. Now, before I even begin, if you're like, I really want to see your software, I don't have time to listen to you for 5 minutes, or I want a more in-depth overview, we do offer demos and free trials. So you can actually connect your data to this. We can pull it for you. It's very easy. It takes 5 minutes to set up and less than 2 days to actually get your data pulled into this. And then you can actually have one of our account executives walk through all of your data with you and give you a more in-depth overview than we'll be covering today. Please, if you're interested at all, check that out. But here, I'll give you a high-level overview. Yeah, sorry, give me 1 second. I gotta move my things over. Okay. So what we have, I'll just start over here, is all of those deduction codes that you're actually receiving will just kind of fall into your actionable list. So this is all of the actionable deduction codes that you can actually go after. No need to, go and search on APDP for the ones that you're wanting to go and create claims for, or create disputes for. We have all of that right here for you. And this kind of follows some of those best practices that we've been talking about, how to go about your deductions. So you can filter by the different codes that you have. You can filter by even something that we call validity or readiness. So these are going to be the ones that we've actually pulled all of your data in and done that validity check for you. So are these invalid? Are they likely invalid? Do I have the proof documentation ready for it? You can filter down by all of that right here really easily, just a couple of clicks. And here, all of that information that I was saying that I know you guys have to go and pull is just done automatically for you. So we do even connect to your carriers, your 3PLs, your warehouses, all of that for that proof documentation. Anywhere that proof documentation is stored, we connect to it, and we will automatically associate it to each of the different deductions or claims that you're receiving. So you can just jump in here, see I have all of what I need, and hit this submit dispute button. Now this submit dispute button is actually going to take all of that work, all of those steps that we walked through earlier and do it for you. So we call it the single one-click disputing. But if you're like, hey, Melodie, that's not fast enough, I don't want to click into it and see it. We also have bulk disputing. So you can go and submit up to 100 deductions, 100 disputes within just 2 clicks. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but up here at the top, I just clicked the ones that I'm wanting to go after and submit disputes. Now, the benefit of doing this versus doing that mass dispute creation inside of Walmart is that, again, we're actually attaching that proof documentation automatically to it. So, like I said, mass dispute creation will sometimes see like an 8% win rate on that. This has doing it this way, doing this bulk disputing, has the same level of success as if you went in one by one and researched it, and sometimes even better because we can actually go and again attach all of the proof documents that you need. Now that's a really high level overview of just this page. If you're saying like, hey, that bulk disputing is still not quick enough, I want to move even faster, well, you're in luck because we also have auto disputing. So if you're like, Melody, I don't want to see it. I don't want to touch it. I just want it to happen. We actually do have that set up for you guys. So this is something that you can go in and actually set up for a variety of different claim codes, a lot of those short shipping codes that we were talking about. Say, hey, I want to turn on auto disputing for it. I want to select the criteria that I want to be going after, such as if it's invalid, likely invalid, or validity unclear. And just anything that is maybe under this maximum amount, just go ahead and submit the dispute for it as soon as you have that proof documentation. So we take it from one click to take 2 clicks to solve 100 deductions to 0 clicks. So probably the fastest solution that you'll find out there. And one of the benefits of this is that you can actually work through kind of that backlog that we see a lot of suppliers really struggling with. Okay. Just high level, if you're like, okay, I've solved all my deductions. Now I need to build reports for my leadership team or for the rest of my team to show all the hard work that I've been doing or the savings, the ROI that we've actually experienced with using a platform like yours. We do have that dashboard, this dashboard that you can see how much has been improved by SupplyPike, what your auto and bulk disputed deductions are, how many documents we've actually prepped to go with your different disputes, what is the percentage deduction cleared, whole bunch of really great information that is just difficult to put together yourself using something like APDP. So I won't go through all of it, but this is kind of the high level reporting that we have. We also have an option where you can actually go and export some of this data if you're wanting to build your own reports. That's the bulk of what we cover. We do high level. It gets so much deeper. There's so much more information if you want to do a personalized demo with your data. But we also solve for things like overages, OTIF, SQUEP. If you want a summary of all of the different types of revenue loss that you might be experiencing with Walmart, we also have that. So please, if you're curious at all, just feel free to book some time on our calendar and we can help you out with that.